Hello and welcome to another edition of our Coffee Chat series, where we sit down with thought leaders and industry professionals to have the conversations that matter most to our digital community. My name is Hope Ukebu, and today we're going to be spotlighting digital learning. So education in Nigeria has always been resilient. Even in the absence of perfect systems, learning still happens in our classrooms. It still happens in our homes. And now people are increasingly learning through digital tools. But the question is not just whether technology exists, it's whether it's truly working for those that need it the most. And that's why today's coffee chat will focus on the intersection where education meets technology. And I'm very, very excited to be having this conversation with someone who is building directly in the space. So joining us today is Peter Adeyemi. Peter is the founder and the CEO of Cubbes. And Cubbes is a startup that is focused on improving how learning happens through digital solutions. Peter also works closely with both educators and learners, which gives him very grounded perspective on what's working, what's not working, and what needs to change. Hi, Peter. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Hope. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yes,
Thanks for
thank
having
you.
me.
Okay, so let's dive right in. Let's start from like a big picture view. Over the last few years, digital tools have become more visible in classrooms in education, from online classrooms to learning apps. And schools are now using hybrid teaching models now. But I would like to ask, from your perspective, how has digital technology changed the way that students and teachers engage with education, especially in Nigeria today?
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that question. And also thanks for, putting this together because it's really important that we hear, these perspectives. I would like to backtrack a few years ago, which is when COVID happened. I feel like COVID accelerated a lot of, the effort to digitize learning in Nigeria, most of Africa, and even most of the world. It was a time when we really caught up with using digital tools to learn. But to go directly to your question around how that dynamic has now changed for students, teacher engagement, I think one of the things it has done is that it has helped move us from the four walls of a classroom to having education be more accessible, more flexible, and then more student focused. So we are no longer having to always be in a physical space for education to happen. And that's really important. You see now that most teachers and lecturers now adopt Zoom. So if you are a student in Unilag, for instance, you find that your teacher can say, I'm not having a physical class today. We can use Zoom to have our class, right? So which means students can be anywhere around the country, around the states, and still have their lectures. Something else that has also changed between that relationship between teachers and students is you typically find in the past, the only way a student could learn was to down photocopy materials. But you find that these days teachers send like digital materials and digital resources to their students. So all of this, even the way they handle projects is now changing. Back in my day, I remember the way to do your project was to print like 7 copies, take to your lecturer. But now you can just send them a Google Doc, they review, they put their comments. So increasingly, we are moving away from those traditional manual methods to a place where most interaction between teachers and students are now digital.
That's very good. But do you think that this change is reactive or is intentional? Like, is it more reactive or more intentional?
And I'm smiling because it is reactive, to be very honest. And to a very large extent, it's reactive. Like I said, it was born out of the need from the whole COVID happened, then we learned to work digitally. Well, most of the games we even had from COVID, we lost it because classes resumed back physically. People went back to classes and they just stopped most of the online virtual digital things that they did. But a lot of it is also coming back thanks to also companies like Cubes that are making sure technology is available, and not just available. I think one of the problems of technology is that if it is not localized to the people, then it's very difficult to adopt. So if it's just a generic product from the US, for instance, that is not built for Nigerians, that doesn't consider the challenges of a typical Nigerian around what their devices look like, what their data look like, then it won't work for them. And that's the problem people like us solve, where we can localize the technology to the context. So to answer your question, I think it's reactive for the most part, especially because we have like an older generation that is not really technology savvy, being the educators. So there is a bit of reluctance to adopting new technologies. But increasingly we'll find that they don't have a choice. The times demand
Yeah.
that you also catch up and join the train.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much. I mean, I think that while digital education holds like a lot of promise, LBC is usually far from ideal when it comes to our students, our teachers, especially here in Nigeria. We've seen a lot of cases where, access does not automatically translate to effective use. So I would ask a question based on that, saying that what would you say is the biggest challenges that our students and teachers face when it comes to accessing and effectively using these digital tools in Nigeria? I know you've mentioned something around, it not being localized to our context, but I
Yeah.
also like to hear from you a lot if you can delve deeper into it. And also if you can also share any real life examples that you've encountered through your work with Cubes.
Right. And thanks for that. I think it's really important that we, you know, localize this discussion that we are having. So I'll definitely give examples. But I think the first problem is something I also mentioned in the past, which was like the willingness to adopt, right? So that's one big challenge, willingness to adapt. So there are different layers to it. One layer is the institutions themselves or policymakers. What are the efforts they're making to push through some of these technologies to be adopted, you know, globally around maybe the country or a state? That effort is not really there. So that's one challenge. I think the other challenge is then the person or the people. And like I mentioned earlier, we have an older generation that is not fully tech savvy. And that older generation has two problems. So one is that, and I'm speaking now to like lecturers in universities, professors and co, they are very protective of their work, of the work that they write, their research. And to them, it feels like technology has the potential to steal that work from them. So they are very close-minded. Like I don't want my work to be dumped somewhere. And most of this also comes from like the misconception of what technology can do. They just believe once you use technology, you can literally make some magic abracadabra and I've lost everything overnight. So that's one. Then second is just, they are not technology savvy, so they're also reluctant. Like, I don't want to adopt this new technology. Moving beyond that, there is also the access itself. So data is not cheap, at least for most learners, for most students, it's not so cheap. Yeah. When you measure the disposable income available to these students versus how much they spend in data is actually really, really almost matching. Like almost some of their money goes to like data. So you find that students, instead of adopting technology, they go back to the manual method. So they prefer to print their material instead of studying their material on a device. So I think this is also really important. The third one I'll mention is something around the hardware, because technology is transferred through some means. So phones, laptops, or other devices. We don't really have access to the best tools here. You find students still using very old phones, outdated. Maybe they are using an Android phone, but the OS is outdated. So those are some of the issues. And I think another one is just education generally. Are people aware of how they can, use this technology? Are people aware that these technologies even exist? So these are the ones I'll spotlight, and I'll stop here so you can have time to ask more questions.
Okay, so basically, affordability, monetary constraints, and I think mindsets. That's what I'm hearing from you. A lot of our, I don't know, professors, lecturers, all of them, they are very, very closed-minded when it comes to technology. And
Yes,
to
and,
be
and I said I
honest,
will
that
give
does not.
And I said I'll give an example, right? So I don't know when you went to university, but right now in universities, lecturers still get to class and start calling the names of students one by one. Peter, then they mark attendance. Right now, attendance is a mandatory thing for lecturers to take in class, but there's no real digital way to do it. So they still defer to the manual way. At Cubes, we built something that helps them solve this digitally. So he can geolocate the student to the class. He knows who is in class when he got to the class, so the lecturer can easily take attendance. But we are seeing that some of them are still not open to it. They are still saying, "So am I the one that will put it on? Am I the one that will say I'm in class?" So there's just all of these, issues. They're also concerned about their students. What if the student doesn't have data? Like I mentioned, data constraints. So all of these issues come together in this one example, the older generation not being open-minded, the younger generation not being able to afford it, and all. So yeah, mindset and access is, like you summarized, is very correct.
Just to mention something based on what you said, I studied edutech, but I don't know what was techie about what I studied. Sorry, but really, I
You're
don't know
not
what was
alone.
techie about what I was taught in class and all of that. A lot of the things that I know today around technology and even education, it has to do with things I had to learn myself.
Yourself.
I think we need to do better. Our lecturers, our educators need to do better. But in this regard as well, especially around secondary schools, there are schools that have now introduced some kind of new technology, some kind of new curriculum that adapts digital tools and for the teachers to use. But sometimes a lot of these things are just dumped on the teachers' tables. They don't get support in terms of training, learning how to use the tools. They just dump it on them and ask them to figure it out, use it. From your work with cubes, from what you've seen on the ground, do you think that these teachers, especially when they're just placed in front of the tools, use it, you must use it, especially in secondary schools, leave tertiary schools out of it, do you think that teachers, when they're just placed in front of the tools, do you think they can adapt well to some of these tools? Do you think that, the tools is really empowering how they learn, how the teachers, teach the students and how the learners themselves learn, or are they struggling to keep up?
I think they are struggling to keep up, to be honest. So, like you said, you studied edutech, but there was nothing techy about the edutech you studied. And this is the reality for so many, because I mean, people in education are the ones who become teachers and then eventually lecturers, and something like that, right? But what you find mostly is that even not the older generation, even like the younger generation, when you introduce a tech tool to people and you don't give them adequate training, they just have this kind of, they try to withdraw back because they just don't fully understand how they need to use the tool that you have placed in front of them. And I think it's a major problem. Again, what I said earlier around the solution, for instance, is not localized to the situation of the user, and it's just maybe an imported solution that they don't really understand, and nobody really sat them down to give them training and break it down for them. Then there's an issue. That's one. Secondly, is also meeting them where they are. I have a personal thesis that technology has to be incremental. You just don't dump like a full system on someone without first saying, okay, this is what you do every day with this, right? Then when you do this happens, then you now do this. Next time we'll introduce this other element to it so you can start doing this. That's the kind of thinking that it should be incremental, not just like a dump on the lecture on the teachers and these trainers. Um the other part of this is that because these people are already overworked for the most part, a teacher is taking maybe three classes, they have to prepare lesson notes. The reality for them is that anything extra just feels extra. So even though the technology is coming to help them, it just feels like extra work. You mean I will write my lesson note here, then I'll also do it online? No, I'm not going to do it online. Yeah. So they just, get very defensive. And I think the last one is just fear. Imagine a teacher in front of like Gen Alpha students trying to teach them, and then he's making mistakes with the tool they put in front of him. You just don't want to show that you don't know how to use it in front of those people. So I think that's also like contributory as well. So I think these are the things. I really feel like technology should be enabling. If the users see that the coding, then there is already a problem. So we should make it as incremental as possible. Make sure there's training, there's videos, they're like guides that they can use to know, okay, this is what I should do next, just to help them catch up, and then do better.
Thank you very much, Peter. To follow up on that, I know you've mentioned the question I want to ask you, you've answered it a little bit, especially when it comes to secondary school students, where they need support based on, training. For them, it's training, right? And then for those in tertiary institutions, I think theirs is beyond just training. Starts from awareness, changing their mindsets and helping them know that, okay, these tools that we're giving you, this is what it can do for you. We're not just giving it to you to steal your work, we're giving it to you to help you. I mean, if you spend like 3 hours preparing your work, for a class, this tool can help you prepare it
Do
with
it in lesser
lesser
time.
time. Yes. So thank you so much, Peter. So, this brings us to solutions, and by that I mean cubes. Beyond diagnosing the problem, the real work is in building the tools.
Right.
Digital tools that actually fit our context, just like we mentioned earlier on. And I know that that's what Cubes is trying to do. But just to hear from you, can you share how Cubes is contributing to making digital learning better? And what are the specific gaps that you're trying to close?
Great. And thank you for very much for that question. I'm always very excited to talk about what we do at Cubes and how we're helping learners. And I won't feel like I want to start at the end. So our mission is to help people improve with technology, help them improve their learning experiences, one, and their learning outcomes too. And we started with the tertiary, class, people in universities, polytechnics, and colleges of education. And we've seen a lot of testimonials regarding that. People who say they have 5.0 GPAs just because they use Cubes, people who say they graduated with first class just because they use Cubes. Every day we hear these testimonials. And so that leads me to the beginning. Now, to the beginning, I was talking to a student and I was asking her how she was preparing for her exams. And she told me she needs to go and photocopy past questions. So this was like 2022. Like, why are we still doing that in this age where you can practically sit down here and transfer money to someone in the US in like seconds? You can do anything. And why are we still doing manual processes in our higher, tertiary institutions? So that very evening, I sat down with these students and I made her list out every blessed thing they do in school. How do you do this? She'll tell me, I'll write it down. At the end of that evening, we came up with a list of about 42 things that they were still doing manually. This included how they got access to their materials, how they got access to their past questions, how they track what they study, you know, and a lot of other things. So we wrote down these things and then um, we started to build it, which is now what Cubes is. Um, Funny story, we first called it University Mate, Unimate. That was the first name before we then changed it to Cubes. And we chose Cubes because we know we are shaping, so like it keeps shape, we are shaping the lives of the new generation that is coming. So what we are doing for students is basically helping them get access to their resources, but more importantly, helping them organize their resources in a way that will aid their learning experience. And then thirdly is giving them tools on top of that to make sure that they're not just studying better, but they now understand better and they can pass, their exams, which is like the outcomes that they need to do.
Okay, thank you. In your, I don't know if to call it market research or your dealings with learners and even teachers, lecturers, is there anything that has surprised you apart from the testimonials that people give? What has been the most, should I say, surprising or shocking thing that you've experienced since building the app Cubes?
Okay, I will not say shocking. I'll say for us is the wow factor. So according to all the technology jargons and the startup jargons, you should leave a wow in the mouth of your customer just like 2 minutes after they encounter your products, at least. And that's what we aim to also do at Cube. So when a student downloads the app, first thing they find after they register and say, I'm from the University of Benin, I'm in civil engineering too. And this is my first semester. The first thing they find is that they find their courses. It's always shocking to them, like, wow, how did you know my courses? So I literally go for school onboarding. I stay in one place. I see students download cubes and try to set up. And I can see the excitement on their faces, like when they find their course. Like, then they click on the course and then they find all their resources, everything organized, everything numbered. This really gives me joy. Like just looking at them, the getting it done on them that, oh my God, there's actually a tool like this that can solve all of my academic problems. So I think that would be, the story I'll share.
Thank you very much. So I think the next and final question that I will ask you is how can we access Cubes? Where can we find it?
Yeah, so our website is cubes.app. Cubes is spelled CUBBES.app. On there you find all the links. So you can download the Cubes app as a student on the Play Store or the App Store. But we also do a lot more things, right? In recent times, we also have a product for lecturers, like I said. There's a lecturer application for that. The lecturers can find their resources. They can send resources directly to their class, to their students. They can mark attendance, they can do assessments, So funny story is that when you go to any lecturer's office, it's always so scattered. When you try to have a meeting with the lecturer, they'll say, come today by 10 a.m. But when you get there, you'll not find them. Their schedules are always scattered. So we also made it something to help them organize their day. They know exactly what they're doing when, so they're not scattered. So we have this beautiful tool for them, organize their research. So whatever research they do, they know what journal to post it, you know. And then we have a suite of other solutions as well. And a lot more things that we're developing in 2026. It's a very exciting year for us, and I'm really excited for all the successes that, people using Cubes will experience. But yeah, you can find us on Play Store, Cubes, Cubbes on the App Store as well.
Okay, listening to this is very clear that the problem today is not just the tech, it's the systems and it's the people. And maybe it's a whole lot of policy problems as well. But Peter, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing, not just sharing cubes, what you're building, but what you're seeing on the ground. I mean, like you said earlier, these conversations, they really matter because they help us to move from assumptions to reality. Thank you so, so much. Thank you again for joining us. Yes, thank you. To our audience and our community, thank you for watching. This is just the beginning of the conversation. So make sure that you share your reflections with us in the comment section. You can let us know what your experience has been with regards to digital learning. How has it been like for a student, for as a teacher, a lecturer, or even as a parent? Any questions that you have, you can ask them in the comment section and we will be happy to answer them. Peter has also shared with us, how you can access the Cubes app. You can go to the website Cubes. See,
Dot app.
thank you very much. And you can also find it in Play Store for those of us that are using Androids and Apple Store for those of us that are using iOS devices. So thank you very much for watching again, everyone. Until next time, let us keep building towards a digital future. And make sure you learn one digital tool today. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.